Legion, it's Hadrian. Thank you for being here, and welcome back to Strategy School in Civilization 6 Rise and Fall. Don't forget to check out the series overview if you're just watching for the very first time. What I would like to talk about with this episode are the 3 basic resource types that are available in Civilization 6. Before I can get to that topic, though, we have to discover the third type. We've currently uncovered the luxury resource type to our east, and we have some bonus resources, which we've talked about, to our west and our south and our northwest, and immediately to our north as well. We have some sheep, but we haven't uncovered any strategic resources yet, and I'll talk about those once we've found them, which means we actually get to make a few moves and actually take a turn or two as we kick off this episode. So one of the first things I would like to talk about before I get to resource types is this guy right here. A very common question among new Civilization players, even if you're not playing Civilization 6, but definitely among Civilization 6 players, is we get this free unit, usually a warrior. What do we do with it? How effective is it as a scout? Should we scout with it? What are the pros and cons of doing that? And that's what I want to kind of answer, and we're going to make an initial move or two until we discover the third resource type, which is hopefully nearby, and I'll talk about average proximity and stuff like that. How often can you expect not to be able to find this stuff when I actually get to that point in the video? So we do have this warrior selected, and notice that when I select the warrior, it immediately shows us a blue outline, light blue outline that shows where we can move. We have 2 movement points, and it is important in general to understand how movement works across space, across different tile types in Civilization 6. We are currently standing on a jungle hills tile. This is a rainforest tile. And moving onto flatland from jungle and or hills is just going to cost 1 movement point. It doesn't cost any movement to leave a complicated tile like this. But notice that the game is not saying I can move here, because moving to this hills tile from this hills tile will use up all of my movement points. There is something that's a little bit devious about the game's current movement outline as well, in that you're looking at this going, oh, look how far he can move after crossing the river. That's only because Uruk is here. Normally, if this capital city were not here, you would not see this tile or this tile highlighted. The only place we would be able to move other than this tile here would be here, if Uruk wasn't there. That's because crossing a river costs either everything that you have for your movement points or 3 movement. If you're lucky enough, either through bonuses or some other means to have, if it's just that advanced of a unit later in the game, for instance, to have 3 movement to spare and then some, you can cross a river and then make another move. But typically crossing a river means that you have sacrificed all your movement for that turn, because it's 4000 BC and you're telling your people to ford a river. It's kind of a complicated endeavor in most cases. So you do want to be mindful of the different rules for moving around the map. And that is one of the most expensive ones, is moving across the river. Because the city's here, it's giving us a little bit of a magic movement point. It's just costing 1 movement point to move onto these, or actually from these Plains Hills jungle tile. This is a Plains Hills tile with jungle on it, onto a Plains Hill tile with a river in between, but it's only going to cost me 1 movement. I could still move to this tile because this is a hills tile, but this is a plains tile, and that, again, only costs 1 movement. That's because the city's present. The city wasn't there, it'd be an entirely different story. But what we're going to do is we're going to move up this direction with the scout. So I mentioned what are maybe some of the pros and cons of doing this. What are some of the pros and cons, or not with a scout, but with a warrior, sorry. The scout is building and will be done in 4 turns. But what are some of the ups and downs of doing this? Well, some of the pros are that if you put your warrior out looking around early on, you might encounter some of the initial barbarians. You might even find their encampment and be able to clear it, which will get you gold, will get you experience for your warrior, and maybe even let you level them up and make them stronger. And it also eliminates that early game threat to where you don't have as much pressure early on. That is one of the big wins that you can have if you properly use your warrior in the early game. That can really backfire on you, because if you encounter a barbarian encampment that has already been pissed off, as in a scout has come back with information on a neighboring civilization, which I'll talk more about barbarians in a separate episode, but if there is a barbarian encampment that's already spawning a raiding party, then you're going to have more than 1 warrior can really deal with in most cases, and you'll either have to run away or be very, very clever in order to survive that situation. So the downside of using a warrior to scout is that you can lose this free unit that the game gives you in the early game, and you want to try to avoid that if you can, because the game gave it to you. And especially if you've leveled the unit up once or twice, you've given them a few promotions, why would you be too careless with that unit by using them as a scout instead of as a fighter to help protect your city and maybe launch wars on neighboring civilizations before they get too big and powerful? So, another big thing to be concerned about when using a warrior to scout is that if you meet another civilization, I'm not talking about a city-state or barbarians, if you meet another civilization with a military unit, you will make a negative first impression on that civilization. There might be, if you're lucky, some personality factors, some of which are constant, some of which are randomized, which help that civilization to like you. But if not, you're in trouble, and you have just negatively predisposed yourself, or negatively predisposed that other civilization toward you, because you met them with a military unit. So throwing these units out into the unknown can be a little bit hazardous. And of course, one thing you might also be realizing is that, they have 2 movement points each. Talked about that a little bit. If you move them too far from your city and all of a sudden there's a threat, it might take a while for them to get back. Now, in the spring 2018 update, they did add +1 movement as a bonus to the commando promotion, which is nice. That's not a level 1 promotion, but you can get it after your warrior has leveled up twice, if you're lucky enough to get that much experience early in the game. And that does make it easier to bring your warrior home in tight situations because you have an extra movement point. You have 3 movement instead of 2. But again, having a warrior really far away because you've been using them as a scout, when you suddenly find that you have a barbarian raiding party or even an entire civilization that hates your face because you met them with a warrior a few turns earlier, descending upon your main city, can be a really crappy situation to find yourself in because your warrior is stuck and you can't bring them back in time to help defend. If you find yourself in that situation on higher difficulty, you might end up just straight up screwed. So be aware of that. Those are some of the pros and cons of using a warrior to scout. But we are going to look around just a little bit. We have 4 turns until the scout is done. And again, how do we know it's 4 turns? The scout costs 20 production. And we're producing 6.3 production per turn, which actually raises an interesting point I'll talk about really quickly before we make this first move with the warrior. You might be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, Hadrian, that means in 4 turns we will have actually produced about 25 production. We will have produced production, we will have yielded 25 production-ish. So what gives? Where's the extra 5 going to go if all we need for the scout is 20? Actually, it gets kind of stored as overflow and it gets to go into your next project, which is quite nice, right? And that works with overflow in most cases. One thing where it doesn't overflow is with the 40% boost from research. So if you were almost done with, say, anything that had a boost, either whether it was technology or civics, and you were almost done with it without having the boost, and then you got the boost, so you only got like an extra few percentage points, you wouldn't get like another 35 percentage points of research for the next project. It doesn't always work in terms of overflow, but that aside, in general, if you finish something that is yield-based and you have a significant amount of that yield left over on the turn that you finished it, because you had a lot more yield a lot more of the yield that you needed in order to finish the project, then you would be able to put that into the next thing. So we will have 5 production, which we can put into anything else on this list, which is really quite nice. So that's why the scout's going to be done in 4 turns. Also, I haven't pointed out yet, but the game is telling me that we will be done growing with our first new citizen in 4 turns as well, the exact same number of turns. Now, this can be manipulated, which we'll talk about in the city management episode, by changing the tiles that the city is focusing on. You can do it automatically by giving it focuses by clicking these buttons here. We'll talk about that later on. You can also directly manipulate it by managing where the citizens are working. But right now, even if I try to manipulate it, that one tile that's being worked is so good compared to the others that there's nowhere else. Everything is worse. There's nothing better than or even equivalent to this combination of tiles. So the citizens are going to stay there regardless. But in 4 turns, I don't have any focuses set, so the game will automatically pick the best tile to work. Which one do you think they'll pick? It'll be that one. Of course, the game will automatically place the new citizen on that tile, and we'll have 2 more food and 2 more production. Important to think about this, not because you have to micro this stuff when you're playing Civilization 6. I don't want to make you feel like in order to enjoy the game and understand the game and win at the game, you have to constantly keep track of all this, but knowing that in 4 turns, you're going to have another population that will make your city grow faster, that will make your units or your buildings build faster, is generally important. Also, there are detriments because the more burgeoning your population is, the harder it is to keep your city happy. And you may recall that one of the reasons we have 2.6 science per turn is we have an amenities-based, in other words, a happiness-based bonus for science and for culture right now. And as a matter of fact, for production as well. Not for food, but for every non-food based yield, we are getting a bonus right now because our city is happy. Okay? So +5 non-food yields and +10% citizen growth. Again, we'll focus more on this in detail later. But knowing that those things, that bonus can become a penalty because your population grew, and knowing that all of these things that I just reviewed are dynamic based on the size of the city and where the population in the city are working, which tiles are being worked, winning at Civilization 6 is all about playing the yield game and knowing how to balance all of these factors. So I just wanted to review those things before we dive in. So we are going to move this warrior up this direction. We've talked about some of the basics. Oh, I like that sound. So we've made our first move and we've already found a goody hut. We're not even done with turn 1. We're not even fully, exhausted on our movement points for the warrior, and we found a goody hut. That's awesome. I'm going to move him a little bit closer, going one tile at a time. Generally a good strategy if you want to be cautious in the early game. You don't necessarily, unless you're very confident, want to just order your units to go. You can order if you want. I can say, I want you to move here, and it's going to take that many turns. It says 5 turns. It actually means 5 turns from now. So on turn 6, we'll arrive there. But actually, wait. Misinterpreted that. It throws you off a little bit. We've used all of our movement this turn. So the best way to actually look at this is that on turn 5, not in 5 turns, but on turn 5. So it's not on turn 6, excuse me. This unit will arrive at that spot. So you can do that if you want, but it's generally a better idea to move one tile at a time until you've really got the hang of your surroundings and just the movement system in general. So that's it for that. We have met a tribal village. So this is a village inhabited by a friendly tribe, otherwise known affectionately by the Civ community as a goody hut, and we will be visiting them in the next turn. Let's go ahead and go to the next turn. Okay, and now we have fresh movement points available to us. As you can see, these timers went down by 1, and we're going to see what we have here. Hey, that is actually a really, really nice thing to get on turn 2, and we're not even done fully using our movement. Once again, we still have one more movement point after something fun has happened. So getting a builder for free on turn 2 is one of the best things that can happen to you in Civilization 6, because this normally costs, let's take a quick look, 6 turns to build. So we would have had to do something to get some extra production, and how fantastic is it that we just got that for free on turn 2, and we'll be able to take advantage of that. I talked a little bit earlier on about what a builder can do for you, so I'll get to that in a moment, probably in the next episode, as a matter of fact. Maybe this one, we'll see. But I'm also seeing something very interesting up here. When you are scouting, whether it's with a scout or with a warrior, one thing you want to be good at looking for is whatever might be going on the edges of the fog of war, because you can sometimes spot borders before you actually encounter a civilization. So say if you don't want to piss off another civilization, and you want to run away with your warrior before they find you, then you can spot, oh, look, there's a civ. Let me run the other way, and you can do that. But this is actually not a civ. This is a city-state. So now I know what my next episode is going to be about, because we're going to talk about city-state diplomacy. But I'm going to go ahead and move here so we can see. It looks like a production-based city-state, which is another really exciting thing. Let's move here. Awesome. Toronto. So this lovely little notification here is telling me that because we are the first major civilization to meet the Toronto city-state, we have automatically received 1 envoy. I will tell you in the next episode why that's really, really cool. I don't want to bombard you with stuff that's different from the topic of this episode, but that is an amazingly good thing. And look what we just found. Those are our horses. So now we've uncovered all 3 of the major strategic resource types. We'll talk more about this soon. But for now, let me clear these. I got a new city-state quest as well. Yes, we met a new city-state. And also, this is worth mentioning really quickly. This is a rise and fall feature, both the era score that we earned and the timeline that we're looking at it on. Villagers bring gifts as they join our civilization. We got that because we met that particular city-state, or not that city-state, but the village, the tribal village that was right here that gave us the free builder. So let's now talk about resource types before I close this episode out. First of all, we've talked most about bonus resources, and the primary function of bonus resources, this is not unique to bonus resources. This is actually true of all 3 of the resource types, and you can see it by looking at the yields, but they boost the yields of the tile that they exist on. So this is a standard grassland tile, and it's 2 food. A grassland tile with cattle on it is 3 food. Notice that horses have a similar effect on plains tiles. They give you extra production and food here, and of course, Dyes give you faith in production and extra production rather, and then cotton gives you gold. So there's definitely yield-related bonuses. There are definitely yield-related bonuses regardless of the resource type, but bonus resources in particular are dedicated to boosting your yields in one way or another. So if you want, you can put a pasture on top of these and get even more than the bonus yield you're already seeing. It's even more than 3 food. It would become 4 food. If you put a pasture here, it might become 3 food, 1 production. Let's take a quick look, because now I have too much information in my head at once. We can look at this together. It would actually, okay, here we go. So once we had exploration, it would provide another food bonus, but by default, it's just extra production. So it would turn this into a 3 food, 1 production tile by building a basic pasture until we did some additional research that allowed the pasture improvement, which is built with the builder, to be even cooler. So again, it's all about playing the yield game. You're talking about a single tile and how you can improve it by using a builder to put a pasture down and make this more than just the 3 food tile that it already is. And the bonus resource is what gives it that little bit of extra food. But there is one thing unique to bonus resources that strategic resources and luxury resources can't match, which is, as you may recall from the technology tree, harvesting. Harvesting allows you to actually take a large lump sum of a given yield from that bonus resource. It permanently destroys the bonus resource so you don't get it for the rest of the game. But let's say that you want a huge amount of food right away so that your city grows quickly and you instantly have a new citizen instead of having to wait 4 turns for a new one, or however many turns it might be taking. Or let's say that you want, right here, cattle and sheep and deer are what you can get by researching animal husbandry. You can harvest any of those 3 types. Cattle and sheep provide food, deer provides gold. If you want a large sum instantly of any of those 3, you can harvest. Any bonus resource you see, anything with a gold background, resource icon, you can harvest. Now, I don't have any in my territory right now, so we're not going to demonstrate that. And to tell you the truth, I very rarely do it. But you have the option of doing it, and Civilization 6 is all about presenting you with meaningful options and choices. So you can harvest bonus resources in order to get certain benefits. And of course, you can improve all of these resource types, regardless of whether they're strategic, bonus, or luxury. And there are certain things that you can do with religious bonuses or civilization-based bonuses that you might have just by playing a certain civilization that make those specific improvements more powerful. So you always want to pay attention to the kinds of resources that you have surrounding your civilization, because those will help you inform your choices on what kinds of bonuses you want to go for instance, religion. So that's bonus resources. Let's now talk about strategic resources, because these are much more military-based, as you might have guessed, because you might remember from Code of Laws, we talked about how the unique thing to the civics tree is these policy cards. And the red cards are all military policy. In general, the game's color for military stuff is red. And the reason strategic resources have a red background is that they are always there to support a specific type of special military unit. If you have horses, of course, you will be able to train horsemen. Now, you have to know the right amount in order to get the best benefit. So what I mean by that is that you can't just, have horses in your territory, put an improvement on top of it and be like, cool, I've got horses, now I can train them. If you have one horse's tile, it's always weird to say if you have one horse's, but it's not grammatically correct, but because you're talking about a horse's tile, if you have one horse's tile, then what you can do is train in an encampment city. That's a specific type of district that has a military training center. On those cities where you have put in the effort to build an encampment, you can train horsemen if you have one horse's tile in your empire. But if you have 2, then you can train that unit anywhere, regardless of whether there's an encampment. So ideally, you want to have 2 of every strategic resource type. Now, I mentioned much earlier in the episode that strategic resources might be a little harder to come by than you might think, and this is true. The only one that's readily visible in the beginning of the game is the horse's strategic resource. All the rest of them have to be researched, so it might be iron, it might be aluminum, might be coal, might be uranium, might be niter, which is used for gunpowder. But you have to research where they are in order to find them, which means that sometimes they might actually turn up, by the way, under a city or a district that you've already built. If that happens, it's okay. The game will give it to you. You don't have to demolish what you've built, whether it's a city or a district. But if it's an improvement, if you have a farm on a tile where all of a sudden they discover that there are some niter or something that has to be mined, not farmed, in order to be taken advantage of, then you have to get rid of that improvement. You do have to rebuild on that tile. But if it's a city or a district, something that you can't demolish and readily change, then the game will simply give you a resource that is uncovered by research, a strategic resource that is uncovered by research. So that's how strategic resources work. Luxury resources are very similar, but they are not used for military means. They are used for amenities. They are one of the ways that you keep your citizens happy. And I will talk about how to keep citizens happy and about amenities in more detail in a later episode, in a coming episode, in fact, in the next couple. But for now, all I want to tell you is that you want to have variety. You want to have as many different resources as possible. And that doesn't mean, like, let's say both of these were dyes or both of these were cotton instead of one being dyes and one being cotton. That doesn't mean that you want a situation where you have a bunch of one type of resource. That's not very good. You want variety for your citizens. Every single luxury resource type will only benefit your people once. If you have an extra, you can trade them, but you can't benefit from them more than once. So you only ever get the benefits from one of a given luxury type, and then any extra that you have, you can simply use as leverage in trade. But you can also, that's how you get luxuries that you might not be able to find in your borders. If you encounter another civilization that does have an extra of a luxury resource, you can get that, and that will help keep your citizens happier. Very realistic, right? Because this is how civilizations trade in the real world, especially, when you think about the Silk Road and ancient trading routes. That's what it was all about, is that let's use, the roads that exist between our civilizations, the connections between civilizations to enrich both civilizations. Let's trade, let's exchange. That's what trade is all about. So what you don't have, another civilization might be able to compensate you for if you have something that they find valuable. Now, the same is true, by the way, for strategic resources. So if you have an extra horses that you don't need, if you have 3 horses in your territory, you can trade an horses strategic resource to another civilization. And lucky you still get the bonus of having 2 horses because you haven't traded away your second horse. You traded away your third. So you still get to train horses anywhere you want, or horsemen, anywhere you want. And we'll be able to trade to another civilization and get some benefit, maybe gold, maybe a luxury resource. So you can trade strategic resources as well. They kind of work like trading cards. As long as you don't trade away the one that you need in order for the benefit you're looking for, you're good. So if it's an extra, you can trade it away for some kind of exchange. Now, one last thing that I want to mention before we end this episode is something that I think it threw me off for a very long time, and I literally learned it from playing Civilization 6 on YouTube and having people come in and explain to me, hey, wait, it's not this way, because it can be kind of confusing. I have talked to you so far about the importance of having tiles within 3. If you want them to be worked by your city, they have to be within 3 tiles of your city, right? So, for instance, these cattle are too far away. We will never be able to get the tile yields from workers in Uruk, because that's the 3 tile mark right there. Right here. So we're too far away. We're going to have another city, probably the city that is put in place to get those horses, in order to take advantage of that cattle. But for luxury and strategic resources, for all of the benefits that I just mentioned that you get from those resource types, aside from the yields, I'm talking about the ability to train units for strategic resources and the amenities, the happiness bonuses that you get from controlling a luxury resource. You do not have to have those resources within 3 tiles of a city in order to have those benefits. Yes, they need to be within 3 to be worked for their tile yields, but the benefits of the luxury resource or the benefits of the strategic resource, other than that, are yours as long as the tile is in your territory and improved. It doesn't matter if it's within 3 of a city. It doesn't matter if there's a citizen working it. If you have an improvement on a horse's resource, it doesn't matter how far away from your city it is. If it's in your territory and you can improve it with a builder, you will see that you get an additional horse's resource available to you. And the same is true of any other strategic resource. The same is true of any other luxury resource. And with that, believe it or not, this video is a lot tougher to nail in terms of all the little details that you need to cover for these basic topics, this particular topic, than you might think. So I'm going to stop here before I lay any more on you. If you have any questions about any of that, feel free to ask in the comments below. And in the next episode, like I said, we're going to talk about initial diplomacy. We might even meet some barbarians or another civilization in the next episode, if we're lucky. So we're going to have to see what happens, but we definitely will be talking about city-states in the next episode, and then continuing on with hopefully our next couple of turns to see what else the game has in store for us. And hopefully we'll get our scout in play as well and start looking around in different directions. And like I said, it's all going to be about diplomacy for a couple of episodes and maybe some initial interactions violent or non-violent. We'll have to see. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this one, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to follow along. New episodes are coming out every other day at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Comments are always welcome. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.